Which are your most famous buildings, or which project do you want to introduce today?
I've chosen a project we've done in Cape Town, which is a housing project. It was a pilot where we were experimenting with different ways of building and different systems. We chose a sandbag building because it gave us the opportunity to build in a simple way, including the people who were actually going to live in the houses as well, but also to find a kind of material that would improve the thermal performance of the building. We live in a warm climate and we need to reduce the energy buildup inside buildings, so we need materials that can actually block the heat, but also when the heat is generated inside, we need buildings that can actually absorb the heat and keep it. So we've chosen the 10 by 10 sandbag house because we think it speaks to the challenges that architects are facing today of having to build with cheaper materials, building for poorer people who cannot afford the building materials that are available. We've chosen a building that we've done community projects we've done in another township, Philippi, where there's a center that looks after children of poor families. We built a soup kitchen there, also using sandbags. And then we've chosen a new project that we're doing, which is a slum upgrading, also in Cape Town, in a township, and we'll be showing those projects tonight.
Which design elements do you like to use and why do you use them?
You know, we design as best as we can, using design first and foremost to determine how a project is going to look like. But obviously, because we live in an African country, the climate is very, very important to understand. Allow natural ventilation as much as possible. Reduce the amount of sun that penetrates into the building so that you don't have much heat. And when there's heat inside the building, it must be kept, it must not escape. Creating shade for spaces around buildings, shading windows, making sure that windows don't get direct sun. These are the elements we use. We have people who have got very strong cultural lifestyles. People who love to live in a communal way. People who don't have just one kid or two children. People have got 4 or 5 children. Then comes the grandma, then comes the aunt, then comes the uncle. So the house has got to grow, but also has got to contract sometimes. So you always have to prepare for the building to be able to grow as the family grows. And obviously we don't have a lot of variety of materials because of the financial constraints. So we use color in a lot of our buildings because we think that what helps to create environments that are playful, that are interesting, that also give people a sense of identity with their individual houses. So that's the things we work with. We try to work with natural materials as much as possible because in ancient times, in all of Africa, buildings are never meant to be permanent. They are meant to be an ever-growing, ever-changing phenomenon. The idea of using natural materials is about making sure that you don't need high maintenance to look after buildings. They should look after themselves. So those are things that influence me, and that's how I go about architecture. The fact that I came to Germany and spent 15 years there in exile has had an influence, a lot of influence in the way I think. German education is perhaps more rational. Everything is well calculated, and you've got to learn about the grid and all those things. But also learn about how different materials can work together, and also learn about how buildings are made in Germany. I was fortunate to build our South African embassy in Berlin when I finished. And there, I would say we did our best to combine African influences and the German rational Wärmedämmung type building, which had to meet the climate conditions of a cold country. In our country, buildings tend to express the culture of people. So in Berlin, for example, when we did our embassy, we had to think about how do we represent South Africa in Germany. It was just after Nelson Mandela had become the first president. It was South Africa having been reintroduced into the world after years of isolation because of apartheid. It was the first building to be built by the new government. And we were young students, just finished university, having a chance to build an embassy. So the things we thought about were transparency. The building has to be transparent because South Africa was seeing itself as a transparent country. The building had to be democratic. For example, we changed the whole idea of an embassy being made up of different departments and all of them cellular. We made the building open and we created a big atrium space, which in Europe is normal, by the way, atrium spaces. But for South Africa, it was never done before that a building would be so open. We chose materials from South Africa. We chose a sandstone from South Africa. We brought it here via Italy. We chose granite stone from Zimbabwe, also brought to Germany. We chose timber finishes from timber, which is from Mozambique in Southern Africa. So we basically said that the building should not have an African aesthetic just by the way you look at it, but by the way we've built it, by the way we've put different materials together. And all these materials were finished here, high quality, but they were imported from Southern Africa. So for us, it was just important that the building has an African flair, but finish in high quality materials as would be needed to be approved in Germany.